The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the windshield like it had a score to settle. Alexander Sinclair tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes narrowed against the blur of water and darkness. GPS had long since given up, and the winding back roads of rural Vermont didn't care how many private jets you owned or how many countries your company operated in. He was 38, CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, a man who moved markets before breakfast and controlled digital empires with the flick of his signature. But right now, he was just a tired traveler with a dead phone and no cell service, caught in a thunderstorm that refused to let up. When the glowing sign of Miller's Diner flickered into view, it felt like a lifeline. He pulled into the gravel lot, boots hitting the ground with a splash. Lightning cracked across the sky as he pushed open the door. The bell above it jingled faintly, lost beneath the murmur of country music and clatter of silverware. Inside, the world was still, warm. A few locals sat hunched over coffee mugs, shoulders sagging like rain-soaked coats. The diner smelled of burnt toast and old coffee filters, its vinyl booths cracked and patched with duct tape. No one looked up until she walked past his table. She wore a faded green apron. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. Her shoes squeaked. But when she turned slightly to check on the coffee pot, the breath left his lungs. Ara? The name escaped before he could stop it. She turned, froze. Her eyes met his, deep brown, steady, and full of recognition so sudden it hurt. She opened her mouth, closed it, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile people give to ghosts they're not sure are real. "I go by Arlene now," she said gently. "Can I get you something to warm you up?" But Alexander Sinclair wasn't listening to the menu. His mind was stuck 26 years in the past. Ara Monroe, the woman who had held his hand the night his parents died, the one who taught him to tie his shoes and whisper his feelings into bedtime stories when he didn't have the words. The woman who vanished from his life one morning without goodbye when he was only 12. He rose slowly, unsure of his own legs. Where did you go?" Ara's eyes flickered to the tables around them. She leaned in slightly. "Sit. Eat. We can talk after the rush." There was a pause, the kind that swallows everything you've ever rehearsed to say to someone you lost. And then she walked away, her steps quiet, her back straight, but her hands trembled as she refilled someone's mug. Alexander sat, numb. The world outside raged with thunder. But inside, it was something else entirely. A storm of memories, of warmth lost and now found, and a woman who had once been his entire world, now serving coffee like her life had never mattered. He watched her move from table to table, graceful even in exhaustion, and wondered how many years he had spent pretending he didn't miss her. And just like that, the most powerful man in the tech world found himself feeling like a boy again, alone, and completely unprepared for the truth she was about to reveal. The diner emptied slowly, one rain-drenched customer at a time. By the time the clock struck 10, only Alexander remained, his untouched coffee cold, the slice of pie beside it half-eaten. He sat in silence, watching Ara as she wiped down the counter with mechanical ease. Her movements were calm, but rehearsed, like someone used to hiding fatigue behind a smile. She hadn't looked at him again since that first moment, until now. She approached with a fresh mug of coffee and set it down gently. "Still can't drink it black, huh?" she said softly. "I remember you used to sneak sugar packets when you thought I wasn't looking." Alexander's throat tightened. He stared at her, really stared. "You remember that?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I remember everything." He sat up straighter. "Why didn't you say anything? After all these years? Why didn't you find me?" Ara hesitated, then took the booth across from him, wiping her hands on her apron. "I didn't disappear, Alex. I was told to leave." He blinked. "What?" "You were 12. Your uncle had taken control of the estate. I was just the help. One morning, I was handed a check and escorted out of the manor like I was a criminal. She looked away. They said I wasn't needed anymore, that I was holding you back. Alexander leaned forward, his hands clenched. No one told me. I thought you left by choice, that you just didn't care. Ara flinched at that. I wrote, twice, letters. I never got a reply. He shook his head. I never saw them. Silence settled between them, heavier than the rain outside. And now? He asked, voice low. What are you doing here? Why this place? Ara looked tired for the first time that night. Truly tired. I was working in admin, office support, at Sinclair Enterprises, she said. Yes, your company, Alexander, froze. I was laid off 6 months ago, she continued, her voice calm. Restructuring, cost optimization, they called it. A wave of quiet cuts. They eliminated my entire department. I signed off on that, he said, stunned. I approved that round of layoffs. I know, she replied. That's why I didn't say anything when you walked in. He felt the color drain from his face. I took the waitress job to make ends meet, she said simply. My younger brother has Down syndrome. He lives with me now, needs care. This town's cheap, and the diner offered health insurance, so... Her voice trailed off. Alexander sat back, gutted. You're the reason I became who I am, he whispered. You protected me, loved me when no one else did. Ara offered a small, sad smile. And you're the reason I didn't give up when things got hard. It goes both ways. He couldn't speak. Not yet. Then she reached into her apron and pulled out a folded napkin. Handwritten in soft cursive were numbers: rent, medication, groceries, utilities. Nothing extravagant, just survival. I didn't show you this to make you feel guilty, she said. But maybe just to help you understand what some of your decisions look like down here. He took the napkin gently, like it might break in his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. I believe you, Ara said. But now you do. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. It wasn't just about guilt. It was about responsibility, not to shareholders, but to her, to all the people like her. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind dew-soaked streets and golden sunlight that made the town look gentler than it had the night before. Alexander didn't leave. Instead, he returned to the diner. This time, not as a stranger, but as a man on a mission. He waited outside until the breakfast crowd cleared, then stepped inside, just as Ara was wiping down the same booth from the night before. She looked up, surprised. You again? I stayed at the inn around the corner, he said. I wasn't ready to leave. She raised an eyebrow. People like you don't usually linger in places like this. I'm not here for the pie, he said, sliding into the booth. Ara hesitated, then sat across from him again, her hands folded in her lap. He pulled a document from his coat. I went over our layoffs last night. I had my legal team dig up the records. Your department should have been reassigned, not cut. Someone overrode it. Quietly. Without my approval. Her eyes didn't move from his. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm going to make it right. She gave a tired laugh. By hiring me back as a receptionist? No, he said firmly. By partnering with you. Ara frowned. I think you're confusing guilt with generosity, Alex. He didn't flinch. You always believed people deserved second chances, even me. So let's give them that. He slid a folder across the table. A nonprofit, funded by Sinclair Enterprises, led by you, focused on rehiring laid-off workers, retraining them, giving them support, real help, real jobs. It's called Second Chances. Ara stared at the folder. Why me? Because I trust you, he said softly. Because you understand people in a way I never learned to. You raised me when I didn't even know how to tie my own tie. You taught me what kindness meant. I want you to bring that back to the company I lost touch with." She didn't answer at first. Her eyes flicked to the napkin he'd kept, now folded in his jacket pocket. "You think a program can fix a broken system?" she asked. "No," he admitted. "But it can start something." Ara leaned back, studying him. "I'm not the same woman who raised you," she said. "Life's kicked me around since then. I don't have much left." "That's exactly why I need you," he said. "You didn't give up. You didn't get bitter. That's what makes you strong." Outside, a breeze rustled the flags hanging above the door. Inside, a silence grew. Not awkward, not strained, just full. Then Ara nodded, slow and unsure. "One condition?" "Name it." "I don't want a salary I didn't earn. I want to build something that helps people, not something that makes headlines." Alexander smiled for the first time in days. "Deal." But as they shook hands, something cold settled in his chest. He'd barely scratched the surface of what had gone wrong inside Sinclair Enterprises. And if someone had quietly removed her, how many others had been cast aside in silence? He looked at her, still strong despite it all. She wasn't just his past. She was about to help him fight for the future. The following weeks moved quickly.
Ara relocated to a modest apartment closer to Sinclair's regional headquarters. Alexander assigned her a small but passionate team, most of them former staffers who had been quietly laid off and rehired under the Second Chances initiative. What started as a quiet apology began growing into a movement. News outlets ran polite headlines: "Billionaire, CEO's unlikely reunion," "Spurs worker relief program." But behind the scenes, something else was stirring, something darker. Alexander began combing through Sinclair Enterprises' internal audit reports, ones he'd trusted others to review. But now he read every line, and what he found shook him. Contracts were missing, salaries for ghost employees, expense accounts for trips that never happened, executives approving cost-cutting layoffs while funneling millions into offshore shell corporations. At the center of it all was someone he had once trusted like a brother, Clay Renshaw, the CFO. Renshaw had been with Sinclair since the beginning. He wore designer suits and told charming stories over brandy, always smiling, always offering reassurances. "You focus on vision, Alex. I'll handle the details." And handle them, he had, right into his own pockets. Alexander paced his penthouse late one night, the reports spread out before him like evidence in a trial. Ara sat quietly across from him, reading with the same calm intensity she used to bring to bedtime stories. "This is why they pushed me out," she murmured, pointing to a name buried in the HR files. "Anyone who questioned the numbers, they vanished." Alexander clenched his jaw. "And I signed off on it. I let it happen." "No," she said. "You trusted the wrong people." "That's not the same." He looked at her, pained. "I'm supposed to be one of the smartest minds in tech, Ara. I was blind." "Being smart doesn't make you immune to betrayal," she said gently. "It just makes it hurt more." That night, he made a decision. No more PR games, no more behind-closed-doors settlements. He was going to expose it all. By Friday morning, Alexander stood at a press conference podium, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled. Nothing like the polished titan of industry the world was used to seeing. "I stand before you today, not just as a CEO, but as a man who got lost," he said, voice low but firm. "There is rot at the core of Sinclair Enterprises, and I allowed it to grow. I will not allow it to continue." Reporters gasped as he announced internal investigations, resignations, and lawsuits. His legal team had advised against it. His board threatened to remove him. He didn't care. And neither did Ara, who stood silently in the back row of the room, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm. Later that night, she found him alone on the company rooftop overlooking the city lights. "They're going to come after you," she said quietly. "I know. You could lose everything." He looked at her, weary but resolute. Then I lose everything, but I'm not going to lose my soul with it. She nodded slowly. Then, without a word, she stepped closer and rested her hand lightly on his arm, the same arm she once wrapped in a bandage when he scraped it climbing the old garden wall. Some things don't change, others must. The blow came harder and faster than Alexander had anticipated. Within days of his press conference, Sinclair Enterprises' stock plummeted. News headlines screamed betrayal, chaos, and collapse. Former allies distanced themselves. Investors panicked. The board held emergency sessions, some members whispering about ousting him for the good of the company. Then came the rival. Everhart Technologies, a longtime competitor, launched a surprise bid to buy out Sinclair Enterprises while it was still bleeding. Their offer was generous, but only on paper. If accepted, it would gut the company, fire thousands, and quietly bury the scandal under polished speeches and shareholder bonuses. Alexander refused, and just like that, war began. He poured his own capital into stabilizing Sinclair. He froze executive salaries, sold off luxury divisions, and launched an open audit for the public to see. His personal wealth dwindled. Private jets were sold, lavish properties left vacant. Ara watched it all quietly, never asking why, only how she could help. "I never thought I'd see you like this," she said one night, walking into his mostly emptied office. The once sleek room now held cardboard boxes and whiteboards filled with scribbled plans. "Like what?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Stripped of armor, fighting for something that matters." He didn't smile back, not yet. "This might not be enough," he whispered. "I may not win this fight." Ara walked to the window where the skyline pulsed with electric light. "Do you remember that winter when you were 8 and you refused to wear gloves?" she asked. He chuckled. "I wanted to be tough, and your hands froze. You cried behind the shed so no one would see." He nodded, "And you brought out a blanket and said, 'Tough doesn't mean cold.'" She turned to him. "This is your shed moment, Alex. It's okay to cry, but only if you keep warming people afterward." He stared at her, eyes stinging. He had forgotten that memory. That same night, as headlines blared of a hostile takeover battle, Ara posted something unexpected on social media. It wasn't a statement. It wasn't a defense. It was a story. She wrote of the boy she raised, who used to sleep with a flashlight because he feared the dark, of the young man who clung to work because he didn't know how to process loss, and of the CEO who showed up in a rainstorm not knowing he was about to rediscover his humanity. It went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Thousands of former employees, laid-off staffers, and single parents began posting their own stories. Of second chances, of unexpected kindness, of rebuilding after being broken. The tide turned. Everhart's bid faltered. Sinclair's reputation slowly began to repair, not from flashy PR but from the groundswell of voices who finally felt seen. In the quiet between the chaos, Alexander sat alone in the diner booth where this all began, sipping black coffee he still couldn't stand. When Ara joined him, she brought no folder, no speech, just a quiet smile. "I think you've earned a new kind of title," she said. He looked at her, confused. "What kind?" She tilted her head. "Man of integrity." He looked down, then back at her. "Only because I had the best teacher." And for the first time in years, Alexander Sinclair felt proud of who he'd become. Not because he saved a company, but because he finally saved the part of himself that had been lost for so long. Spring came early that year. The cherry trees lining Sinclair's newly opened community campus were already beginning to bloom, soft petals fluttering in the wind like a promise whispered by the earth itself. The Second Chances Foundation was no longer just a hopeful idea. It had offices in 5 cities, a job match program, mental health grants, and over 400 success stories in its first quarter alone. But for Alexander Sinclair, the real success didn't come with numbers. It came with presence. It came with Ara. She wasn't just the face of the foundation. She was its soul. Every morning, she walked into the headquarters carrying a worn canvas bag filled with handwritten thank you notes from people who once felt discarded. She read one every Friday to the staff, reminding them what it meant to do work that mattered. One afternoon, while visiting a training center in Chicago, a young woman stopped Ara in the hallway. "Are you the one from the diner story?" she asked nervously. Ara smiled. "Depends. Do I look like I serve a mean cup of burnt coffee?" The girl laughed and nodded. "My mom got a job through your program, after 2 years unemployed." She's smiling again. "I just wanted to say thank you." Ara squeezed the girl's hand gently. "No need. Just keep passing the kindness forward." Back in New York, Alexander stepped into the elevator of Sinclair Tower, no longer in Armani suits or flanked by assistants. His wardrobe had softened. So had he. He still closed million-dollar deals, but now he also made time to sit in on resume workshops and speak at community breakfasts. One day, as he walked past a wall filled with Polaroids of rehired workers, he stopped at a photo of a janitor with a crooked grin and a badge that read, "I got my second shot." Tears prickled at the corner of his eyes. He thought of his father's cold legacy, the mansion with echoing halls, the sterile boardrooms where power had meant silence, and then he thought of the hug, the first time he ever let himself cry into Ara's shoulder after the funeral. The warmth of her arms, the way she had said, "You're not alone, Alex. You'll never be alone as long as I'm here." He had forgotten that feeling for far too long, but now he was ready to build something that carried it forward. Later that evening, Ara found him on the rooftop garden they had built over Sinclair Tower, her idea. Wind tugged gently at her coat as she walked beside him. "Nice view," she said. He looked over the city skyline. "Still not as good as that booth at Miller's Diner." She chuckled. "You've changed." He turned to face her, eyes steady. "Number, I think. I finally came back to who I used to be." A pause, and then, from inside his coat pocket, he pulled out a worn piece of paper, folded, creased, slightly yellowed from time. "You kept it?" she asked, surprised. "I never let it go," he said softly. It was the drawing she once made for him, 2 stick figures beneath a storm cloud, one holding an umbrella over the other. "I didn't understand it back then," he continued. "But I do now. You were always sheltering me, even from storms I didn't know were coming." Ara blinked back tears. "I wasn't strong all the time, Alex. I just never wanted you to feel small." "You made me feel seen," he whispered. "That's something power never could." And then, gently, without rush, he opened his arms. Ara hesitated, eyes wide, then stepped into his embrace. The years between them melted away. Not just governess and child, not just CEO and waitress, but 2 people, fractured by time, healed by intention, standing in the middle of a rooftop, holding on. Not for the past, but for the future. And beneath the soft hum of city lights, their story didn't end. It only began again.